Hello and welcome to Movie Night with Andy and Gabe. I'm Andy.
And I'm Gabe over here.
Okay, we've finally done it, boys and girls. I've been convincing him for years to talk about this, and we're finally doing it. Gabe and Andy are talking about Debbie Does Dallas. Let's go! Woo!
No, we're talking about Blade Runner, dude.
We're talking about what?
Blade Runner.
We're talking about Blade Runner.
Yeah.
Fuck! Okay, well, I watched the wrong one today. Jeez.
Dumbass.
Yo, the most boring fucking movie that we could possibly do. I was set. I had my fucking Texas shirt on ready. You're making me watch fucking Blade Runner. Okay, give me.
Nope. Instead of going to Disneyland, we're going to the opera. So fuck you.
Okay, right. Give me. How? Oh, Jesus Christ. Give me 2.5 hours. I'll be right back. It's a hell of a thing to stand on a man's car, pull down your trousers, and shit all over his windscreen. That's what it is to be a slave. Yeah, we're talking about Blade Runner today. I'll be honest, I didn't rewatch this one.
I mean, between the two of us, I know I've seen it 500 million times, so.
I did speak literally just before coming on today with my friend Ben, who you also know, and I just asked him to check my maths about a couple things that I was fairly sure I was right on, but I didn't want to just come on and record and just talk bullshit, basically. But yeah, Blade Runner. The discourse around this film really annoys me. As a film, I think it's really good. I think the sequel is better. I think the sequel explores all the ideas better, and I think the sequel has got a better plot in that it's a detective film that actually has some detecting going on. But I do like Blade Runner, and I know it's your favourite film, isn't it? So please, by all means, talk about Blade Runner.
Yeah, it is my favorite movie. I don't like the whole concept of people saying what is the best movie ever made. I don't think there is the best movie ever made. There are so many movies and they're all so different from each other that's an impossible category. It is my favorite movie. It's everything that I love about the movies, and it's everything that I love about science fiction. And I thought I would organize this a little bit more than I usually do. I'll start with, for those of you who haven't seen it, this is a movie about a police officer, a detective, who is charged with finding and eliminating beings called replicants. Replicants are human looking, and I'm going to put an asterisk there, human looking organisms that are manufactured by corporations to do all the work that regular human beings would not want to do. Dangerous work, disgusting work, all the hard labor, all the dirty jobs, all the military stuff that human beings wouldn't want to soil themselves doing. And if these beings get out of line, or, well, no, just that, get out of line, then our main character, Deckard, is charged with finding them, determining that they are in fact replicants, and eliminating them if they get out of line. The current newest model of these replicants in the film are called Nexus 6, and they are so dangerous that they're not allowed on Earth. And if they're found on Earth, it's shoot on sight. And the reason they're so dangerous is because they are very human indeed, because the corporation that makes them have given them false memories in order to make them seem more human. Which is a very terrible thing to do. And so throughout the course of the movie, our main character, Deckard, is sent to track down and eliminate these replicants, these Nexus 6 replicants that have come to Earth. Why have the replicants come to Earth? They are looking for their creator in order to get him to give them more life, because in addition to giving them more giving them false memories and a false background and a false childhood and a false past, because that would make these replicants so dangerous, their creator, the corporation, and the person who runs the corporation, his name is Tyrell, gave them only a 5-year lifespan, so they can't live long enough to be very much trouble. So they're automatically designed to die after 5 years. These replicants that have come to Earth know that, and they have come to find their creator to get him to give them more life. And is that a pretty good summary of the plot of the film?
That's about the cut of it. What I find really frustrating with Blade Runner is that I think this is so often framed as, but could robots be people? And I find this really frustrating for a couple reasons. The first is that the replicants aren't robots. And the other thing is that whether or not they're people is not in dispute by the film. The film is making the argument, and this is where I get really annoyed, because people get all up in like the Turing test and monism and dualism. It's not about AI. It's not about monism and dualism. That the replicants are people is not up for debate. They're not even robots. They are literally bioengineered humans. The film, it's about how people are dehumanized and the justifications for it in order to propagate capitalism, which I'm not like a mouth foaming anti-capitalist by any means, but that is what the film is about. It's not about monism and dualism. It's not about, can a robot be a person? What makes you a human? Like that's not what it's about. The film doesn't query whether or not the replicants are human.
No, in fact, the fact that the fact that the replicants are so obviously people is the point of the movie. You're sitting there watching the movie and you're getting mad, especially when you hear Captain Brian talking about them. And you're getting mad because in the back of your mind, in your heart somewhere, you're saying you know damn well that these are people. And the Turing test device, which is called the Voight-Kampff test, that's another thing. This detective person, he has this test that he does to figure out if a being is a replicant. That test... Oh, excuse me. Jesus Christ, sorry, hold on. That test is a device that's meant to validate the dehumanization of these people.
Yeah, it's meant to test your empathy, which you're meant it tests your empathy, and because the idea is that the replicants don't have empathy, which something that I really like the sequel for, because the sequel expands on a lot of things. Turns out it's not fucking true that the replicants don't have empathy, even beyond that first film. Like the first film is kind of already implying that it's incorrect, but 2049 is like it's done and dusted. Like the Voight-Kampff test is bullshit. To me, and
yeah, I already assumed that in the first movie that this was a prop that was designed to affirm. What do you call that? It's a confirmation bias device. It's a bias that's meant to tell the person that this thing is not human to justify terminating them, when in fact you know damn well that they're human. You don't need you don't need to ask 20 questions. The fact that these beings are asking what happens when I die, that's proof positive that they're human. The fact that they're concerned about that. The fact that Roy says, if we don't find a solution soon, she doesn't have long to live, and he cares about her, that's proof positive. It doesn't matter what that fucking test says. That test is bullshit. And I already got that from this movie. But no, did you ever hear of a movie called The Day After? Not The Day After Tomorrow, not the
as in
the one about nuclear war.
Yeah, one of the fellas that worked on Star Trek worked on it.
Yeah, Nick Meyer did it.
It's the baby version of Threads, which is the one that we did.
Okay, sure. So so it was a TV special about nuclear war. And what happens in that movie is that this family is having a great life on their farm and their daughter's about to get married, and then a nuclear bomb hits and they all perish slowly, and it's horrifying. And Nick Meyer, in describing making that movie, said it was a counterintuitive experience because he wasn't trying to make it a good movie. He was trying to make it more like a public service announcement. He even said it's like Smokey the Bear. If you have a forest fire, this is what it's going to look like. And if you have a nuclear war, this is what it's going to look like. And that's what Blade Runner is. When you have injustice, this is what it looks like. It just does it. It doesn't explore ideas. It gets you to take the elements of injustice in our society, both contemporary and historically, put them in a different context. Injustices that seem complicated to us right now, put them in a different context, and you see that they are not complicated. And it exposes the kinds of injustice that we have in our own society. And in my view, that's the best way to do it. There are other movies that do explore these deep concepts about AI and what is a person and whatever, and that's all fine. This is a very different thing. This is not an exploration of injustice. It's an exhibition of injustice to show us what those things look like, again, in a different context so that we can really see them. And it talks about all sorts of things, not just what if robots but people, but also it does talk about capitalism. It talks about society. It shows a future that we wouldn't want to live in. It shows a future with a lot of technology that we wouldn't want to live in. And I think that's very meaningfully, especially today, because I believe that we live in a society with a lot of technology that we don't want to live in. I think that if we had examples of other societies that we could have ended up in with all the technology that we have, we would have preferred a different society. So that was kind of ahead of its time. So yeah,
Yeah, I mean the
that's part.
cyberpunk future kind of happened, didn't it? And that's the thing. Like,
Yeah.
I think that one of the questions I've had with Blade Runner in particular is that something I was gonna say before I came on, but I've sort of honestly in the last couple hours sort of pivoted from it a little bit. Was my initial thoughts was just like, it's very easy to say that Blade Runner is a smart movie when Blade Runner is explaining the fucking point to you the entire time. Like, and I've seen loads of people who are like, yeah, Blade Runner's my favorite movie. This is a smart person's movie. This is a thinking person's movie. And it's like, oh, really? What did you take away from the film? And it's like verbatim what it just sort of says to you. But given this discussion, I'm starting to wonder how effective Blade Runner actually was at conveying its fucking point, because everyone seems to think it's a question about whether or not robots and machinery and AI could ever become human.
Oh well,
A lot of people seem
well,
to
it
think it's
depends
about
on
monism and dualism, and it's
no, it
just
depends
not.
on it. No, it's not, and it's about where are they getting that from? But it's like the Wachowski brothers who thought that they understood simulacra and simulation and didn't understand a word of it, and then Baudrillard himself had to correct them on how absolutely antithetical to his own ideas the Matrix was. And you're right that it doesn't explore what is a person. What a person is obvious, and that's the point of the movie. What it does explore is how we justify dehumanizing people and the mechanisms by which we justify doing it and the means by which we justify doing it. And these people, the replicants, are dehumanized through two means. There is societal conditioning. They're simply defined as not being human. And being an American, I have a particular historical aversion to that, because we did a very similar thing to, black slaves that we had kept here. And that's exactly how we simply define them as not human. We simply define them as separate separate but equal, quotation marks around the equal. So that's that's a particular sore spot with me. Sore spot in a good way, that should be a sore spot. And the second way is gaslighting. So that's another thing the movie shows you. I'm not even going to say talks about, shows you, so you think about it, you're talking about it to yourself, is systems of control. And the primary system of control for these beings is gaslighting, which is the worst thing, the most immoral thing you can do to somebody is fuck with their head the way that they did. They give them false memories. They give them a childhood that they never actually had. There's an absolutely ghastly, horrifying scene with Deckard and Rachel, where she's saying, no, you're this is ridiculous. When I was growing up, this and this happened to me when I was a little girl. And he finishes her story because he had read the notes of the false memories that they implanted with her. That's a system of control, and it's a form of abuse. Obviously it's one of Immanuel Kant, who I don't subscribe to his categorical imperative, but he made one very correct observation in my view, and that is it is absolutely impermissible to view or use another person as a means to an end. And here we have a situation where people are being manufactured in order to be a means to an end. It is absolutely the most immoral system that you can have, and it's not unlike systems that we do have, and that's the point. That is what the movie shows, and as far as I'm concerned, the only thing it explores is the means by which injustice is done in that way, the means by which we create these unjust systems of control. And even then, it does a better job at showing it than it does talking about it, because it's not complicated. The means by which we dehumanize and unjustly control each other are not complicated. We talk about them in complicated ways, and we have these Voight-Kampff test things or things like them, and we obfuscate. That's what the Voight-Kampff test is. It's obfuscating. We obfuscate in order to make it seem like this really complicated, well, we got to think about it. And no, it is just straight up unjust.
I remember in the best thing that we've ever done, our this Spooky Dance episode on the Judas Priest subliminal message trial, which you should go and listen to now. I said about how they're interrogating Rob Halford, and they're asking him about the exhalations of the "yeah," as he goes, "Better by you, better than me," and they're going, what does that "yeah" mean? And I remember you just flipped out as I was describing the scene, and you went, "We always fucking do this. We always do this. We go for all around the fucking houses, just talking shit about shit that doesn't matter, because we don't want to talk about the one clearly obvious point in the room that makes us actually have to question ourselves."
I think that's right. Yes.
So no, I get that. And one of the things that I've been thinking about with Blade Runner in particular, because I feel like the influence of Blade Runner, and I'll be honest, I do kind of think it's the influence of Blade Runner and not as much the book. But I think the influence of Blade Runner has been a lot of discussion over, but do the robot people? And I think it's interesting to me that so much cyberpunk media has gotten into that idea and sort of questioning something that Blade Runner kind of settled within the first 5 fucking minutes of the film. I think like Ghost in the Shell, the Fallout games, specifically Fallout 4, which, not the strongest narrative I know, but
Citizen Sleeper, I want to say, for anybody who hasn't played it, please do. They're fantastic games.
I think it's so much so people get so harped on, like they really want to ask this question, that there's a fantastic sci-fi film called Ex Machina,
Hmm.
and I want to talk about this on the show, so I don't want to spoil it for you, but that film is so good, and I think it's got a very, very similar problem to Blade Runner, where everyone is trying to interpret the ending based on two contrasting philosophical views that the film was not fucking talking about.
But see, that's not a problem with Blade Runner. That's a problem with internet communities and audiences. And as you use the word, and I think this word should be exiled from the human vocabulary, discourse.
Hmm.
That's not a problem with the movie. That's a problem with people who watched it.
Yeah, I know, and
Like
I think it's frustrating because I
uh,
think what Blade Runner is saying is something more interesting than do the robot people. It's
it is more interesting,
yeah,
and
it's saying
it's more
the robot is
important.
people, and here is
Yeah.
how we justify mistreating them.
And
Because
here, yeah, just and yeah, and all these other people in our society that we control and dehumanize and use for, as a labor class every day. Here's how we do that. Of course that's more important than what if robots but people.
yeah, I mean, even fucking Star Wars with C-3PO, when he's like, no one ever cares about upsetting a droid. Like we've always had that
Uh-huh.
idea of
Yeah, sure.
like the idea of using machines as sort of like a slave class or something like that, because that's literally true in Star Wars as well. When 3PO complains about it, you're just not meant to think about it. So I get that that
Mhm.
idea has always kind of been relevant in the minds of people since robotics have become more and more of a thing. Could a robot ever be a people? I don't know. I mean, probably not. I don't know. That's maybe a question for a smarter person than I am. But it's still the point to me of like that's not what Blade Runner was about, or debating, or even really
No.
interested in. I think people talk about Blade Runner like it's this hard sci-fi that is really about the science of how it all works, and I don't think that's true at all. I mean, but I think
No, it doesn't even tell you anything about it. It doesn't. People. It's again. I'm repeating myself, but it's not complicated. It's like that episode of Star Trek with the people who are black on one side and white on the other. Like, of course, that's an allegory for, at the time for modern day racism and how, well, in Gene's view, how silly it was. I did well. In any event, it's not. They're not. Again, they're not exploring these ideas. They're showing them to you in a context that will take away your ability to rationalize how we use people in our society and how we develop systems of control and all that. That's what it's for. It's not this. Everybody, Plato's allegory of the cave is not complicated either. You don't have. That's a great thing about the the great books of Western philosophy can be read by anyone at all. They're not these esoteric treatises on things, and most of what we encounter, if the problems that we encountered in our daily lives and in our daily societies were so complicated that only a super genius could think of it, society wouldn't progress. These are things that can be apprehended by anyone at all. Just by listening to these people talk that they're people. It's never in question that they are. It's never, of course, except by the people in that society, and that's the point. Roger Ebert said it best. He said, this is a movie. I'm paraphrasing here, but it's pretty close. He said, this is a movie about people who are people in every way except one, and that one is that lots of other people say they're not. And everybody gets that. And I don't know why people want so badly. I don't know why people want so badly for this to be some kind of like, oh my god, it blew my mind. It's not supposed to blow your mind. It's supposed to make you think, oh, fuck. Maybe I should the next time the next time I hire somebody to do the landscaping on my lawn, maybe I should see them as something other than labor. And maybe that's what it's supposed to get you to see. And I really don't like what you're describing. And I don't talk to people about movies on the internet, and I don't get into quote unquote discourse about. I've never heard anybody say that this is about dualism. And the fact that you're telling me that there are people who think like that, that actually really bothers me.
I think that the sequel actually did get into the idea of what may or may not be a person. And what I liked about the sequel was that the sequel didn't give you a coherent answer on that point, at least, because with the sequel you've got Joy, the hologram lady, and what I actually quite appreciated about that is because as much as Kay comes to the realization in that film that Joy is just saying whatever he wants to hear, there were moments with Joy where Kay was not around and she does things that I thought were weird. Like when the sex worker replicant who she sort of holograms herself over so that she can have sex with Kay, when she's kicking her out of the house and she is rude and dismissive and sort of resentful to that replicant, and Kay is not there to be a witness to it. I thought that the sequel actually did toy with the idea that maybe she is, as Kay says, as like she's ones and zeros, he's not, but he says half the code and twice as elegant. I wondered if maybe they were getting to something where that answer wasn't completely clear, and that they say, well, she's only in love with him because she's programmed to be. But then the question is that, well, she's only in love with him because she's programmed to be, but does that make it feel any less real to her if she is in fact feeling? Because there were definitely points in 2049 where I felt like she was feeling something because he wasn't always there watching her. So
well,
yeah.
No, this isn't a review of 49 or 20. I'll just call it Blade Runner 2 because I can never remember the numbers. Yeah. But this isn't a review of Blade Runner 2. But to that, I'll say it's exactly the same. There's a couple of answers that I have for that. The first is she just doing what she's programmed to do, or is she actually in love? And the answer is it doesn't matter. Are we just doing what we're programmed to do?
Of course.
When when you say that she's just saying what she wants to hear, I do that in my relationships, and that was again very well done by that movie. I didn't care for that movie as much as the first one, only because there was dumb shit in it, and there's nothing that was really jarring for me. The core of the movie's story and themes are absolutely excellent, maybe better than the original, but there's dumb shit in there mixed in that I wasn't expecting that, because Blade Runner, whatever else may be said, there's nothing stupid in it. And in 2049, I felt that there was, and that central villain and that whole scene. Oh,
I'll say this. I will say this because as much as I love 2049, I have no real inclination to cover it on the show. So I'll just say this. I will give it has the only digital recreation of a person in a scene that I liked. This was right around the time when we were getting CGI Peter Cushing and CGI Carrie Fisher, and everyone was trying to gaslight themselves into thinking that it looked real and this was going to be the future of film, and then digital de-aging this and that. And I fucking love that Blade Runner 2049 did it well, and he gets presented with the recreated Rachel and he just goes, her eyes were green, because you can't recreate someone like that. Like, you can't.
That was pretty good.
And that felt like an artistic point to me as well, because Denis Villeneuve has not used that technology since either.
I liked that too. I got that too. But then again, this is what I say, where there's stuff that's just as good as the original, and then there's something stupid which the original didn't have. You have that scene, and then they shoot the Rachel thing in the head, and I'm like, wasn't that really expensive? Couldn't you have used her to like clean gutters or something? Why did you have to it was very jarring. I had a negative opinion initially of Blade Runner 2, but I don't think it's not just that I don't think. I came to realize later I wasn't reacting to the movie. I was just shocked that there was stupid parts in it. Not a lot, not a whole lot, not very many at all, really, toward the end, but there were a couple of stupid parts in it, and it was so similar to the original that really shocked me that could exist in that movie.
I think, though, to be fair, not to turn this into too much of a comparison between the two, you say there's no stupid shit in Blade Runner. I mean,
Mhm.
when Roy Batty blasts his head through the drywall and then he's talking with his head fucking poking up like it's in the stocks, and he's like talking shit to
Uh-huh.
Harrison Ford with his head fucking sticking
Uh-huh.
through the wall. I thought that was dumb in
It
a
looked silly.
in a
It looks
dumb
it looks
way, as
it
opposed to
looks
like
it l-
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, it looks silly, but there's a logical flow to it because his brain is deteriorating. He's dying and he's shutting down. He was acting really weird in that scene, and some of it does look and sound silly. What I'm saying is that what the reason that was happening wasn't stupid, and there wasn't a stupid annoying character that was trying way too hard like the main villain, and it didn't have a villain. Blade Runner, the original Blade Runner, didn't have a villain. It just had proxies for the systems that we have. I don't know. We could get into 49 more at a later time. I know you don't want to review it. I don't really either. I liked it. I thought that elements of it were the majority of it, the as a cohesive whole, it was just as good as the original, maybe even better. It does explore the ideas of relationships, and it just explores humanity in that way. And in that way, it does the same thing it does with um, human autonomy and human, what it is to be a human being, is that it shows you that you can just you can just tell that this is a real relationship because of the way that they interact with each other. You can just tell that these are human beings because of the questions they're asking each other. I told you once I was explaining sorry, I was explaining virtue ethics to you, which I'm all about. And I had said I used the trolley problem in the context of virtue ethics. And in um for some ethical systems or ethical systems of thought, some people might say, well, you sacrifice one to save, there's a calculus. Three is greater than one. You save three people and you kill one person.
Not
Another
me though.
branch
I
of,
I pulled the lever. I pulled the lever
yeah.
towards the one with the more people.
There you go. There you go. Or you could just, yeah, or that would be a cynic, and that's fine, and that's a
No, no, no,
perfectly
no, no, no,
valid
no.
thing.
An
And
arsehole. An arsehole, not a cynic.
oh, okay, there you go.
I
That's
see
a little.
which I see what they're
Uh-huh.
doing, and I see that if I don't pull the lever, only one person gets mowed down. I see there's three people on the other one, so I pull that lever.
Yeah, well, in the example, you're supposed to think that you value human life, and that you're supposed to go with that assumption. Well, then another person might say, well, you don't pull the lever because even though only one person would die instead of three, you would be responsible for the one person dying, and in the other instance, you're not. And then somebody would say, well, you are responsible by your inaction, and they
Well,
get
in
into all
actuality,
this.
you're on the track, so
Sure,
let's be real here.
yeah, but at the end of the exam, I went through all these examples of of other systems of ethics, and then I described how virtue ethics deals with it, which is, it's unsatisfying to people today, but I think it's correct. The virtuous person will just kind of know what to do. If you're in the habit of making good choices and you're in that situation, that actual situation, not a hypothetical, but the actual situation, you'll just kind of know what to do in that moment because you'll be in the habit of making good choices. And that's the kind of that is the kind of intuitive, very human. I'm going to use a term here that's used differently today than it was in antiquity, but common sense. Common sense doesn't mean it's obvious. Common sense doesn't mean you're an idiot if you don't understand it. Common sense means our common experience of being a human being that everybody has by virtue of the fact that we're human beings. Those are the kinds of things that we tend to rely on and should, in my view, rely on. And those are the kinds of things that tell you in Blade Runner that these are people, and in Blade Runner 2 that this is a relationship.
So
So
let's talk about that fucking bird. Not
which bird?
not Rachel. Not Rachel. I'm not being terminally English at the moment, but the dove. The dove.
Oh, well, hold on. Well, if you wouldn't mind holding off on that,
okay,
because
cool.
I have this organized a little bit. Before we get to that, which I'd love to talk about, I actually have in my notes here things to talk about, and one of them is the shortcomings, and that would definitely be a shortcoming. But if we just talk a little bit about, I want to talk a little bit about the visuals and the different versions, if you don't mind.
Oh, here we fucking go. This is part of why I didn't watch it. Again, like I phoned my friend, and I was like, I just need to talk with you for a few minutes about Blade Runner before I go on, just to get it back in my head. Essentially, I didn't want to do the warm-up portion, like, as we're recording.
Sure.
But I also didn't want to talk about anything with you and then sort of, like, spoil each other. Basically,
Yeah.
One of the reasons I didn't want to fucking watch this film back again, because I had reservations about doing this film, but it was like, you know what? We've talked about my favorite film on this show. I'm a man of honor, so we're going to talk about Blade Runner. But I did not want to, one, sit through it when I've also had to. Also had to watch The Thing. And it was like, I've got an option here. I'm only really going to have time to watch one film before we do our recording sessions. It's Blade Runner or The Thing. Right, that's the easiest fucking decision anyone has ever made ever. One is half the length of the other. And so
Yeah.
it's part of it that Blade Runner is long, and it can be quite tedious at points, but also then it's
slow.
Like, it's like, which fucking version? I've never seen the theatrical cut. I'm not convinced anyone has. I think that's like a cryptid. I probably saw the final cut, but when I looked up a list of the different cuts of the film and what the differences were, and the theatrical cut, and then the director's cut that wasn't a director's cut, and then the final cut that is actually a director's cut, but the problem is you're also having to kind of deal with Ridley Scott. And I looked at it, I'm squinting at him, and I was like, I don't know what fucking one I saw. I don't know. But
So I own the I'll tell you what my favorite version is, and the version, and I'll tell you my favorite version, and I'll tell you the version I think people should never see. So I have the DVD box set, which has all 4 of the major releases on it. My favorite version is the theatrical release, and I'll tell you why. So let me preface this by saying there is no version that I think is the best. I think that there are versions that are better than others. They all have shit in them or left out of. Sorry, they all have shit in them or left out of them that I don't like. There is no Gabriel cut. Maybe one day I'll make one. The reason that I like the theatrical release the best is, first of all, that's the version that was meant for audiences, and I always prefer that, even if it may have things in it that I don't like. I'm not fond of recutting movies. I'm not fond of director's cuts. I'm not fond of changing the record. I understand that a lot of the stuff in the theatrical cut were studio decisions that Ridley Scott didn't like, and that would probably made the movie, for some people worse, but that's the way the movie was made and released, and I think that's kind of important. And another big reason that I like the theatrical cut the best is the narration.
because it's a film noir.
That's it. It elevates the noir. It's the first time I've ever heard of a studio making a stupid decision that worked out for the tone of the movie. They thought the audience was too stupid to follow what was going on. And given what you've said about the quote unquote discourse, I'm not so sure they were wrong. But they wanted a narration to sort of guide the audience through what was happening and to walk them through some of the boring parts, because let's face it, the movie is boring. I don't mind saying that. Boring things are important. You know, operas are boring and they're great. Shakespeare's kind of boring sometimes, but it's great. But it is kind of boring. Sorry. The narration takes the noir feel to the next level, and I like it being present. And he sounds like one of those old dime store novels, which is just puts the icing on the cake for that. The other versions, whatever. If you like them, fine. The one version that I would say that nobody should ever watch is unfortunately the only one that you can get these days, which is the final cut. And the reason I say that, I say that because of one line that he changed. And the line was when Roy meets Tyrell. He meets his maker. And in every version that had ever been released, he says to Tyrell, he says, "I want more life, fucker." In the final cut, they used the line, "I want more life, father." No. Roy did not think that Tyrell was his father. He wasn't looking for his daddy. He wasn't looking for his father. He was looking for his creator to repay him in kind for all that he'd done.
It is the final cut I've seen, because I knew the line is, "I want more life, father."
Yeah, so that was an ad lib. I believe that was an ad lib from Rutger Hauer when he said "fucker," and that is it. And there's a reason that they used that line. He was gonna find his creator, and he was gonna make him pay what he owed. He was gonna make him give him more life. He was gonna make him pay up and give him what he deserved. And if he couldn't give it to him, then he was gonna die. And he couldn't give it to him, so he fucking died, like the fucker he was.
Yeah.
He called him a fucker because he is a fucker. He was not looking for his father at any point of that movie. That is such a travesty.
It does
to put that line in there.
It makes Roy seem more erratic, that he calls him father, and then when he can't get his own way, he kills him. Similar to how there was that little goober dudes that had some sort of problem that made them sort of endeared to him, but then they just like flipped and killed him for no reason. So I guess it does still sort of line up, but I can see why you don't like the line change. I don't. Well, he wasn't, but
he wasn't erratic at that point. That was the point in the movie he was the most in control. He knew and I love that dialogue between the two of them when first he beats his creator at chess, then he's having this highly technical conversation about bioengineering and how he could save himself with his creator. I love that. And then eventually it's hopeless. There is no way. They designed those people to die after 5 years so that they didn't get to... I forgive me for saying this. There's no other way to say it. So they didn't get too uppity.
Yeah. God damn it, Tyrell. You could have worked this to your advantage. Tyrell ain't so smart. Tyrell, all the gear and no idea. He really should have played along and then waited until he could, like, quite literally put them to sleep. He fumbled the fucking bag.
He thought he just had to be wise and great, and everybody said, no, and now you get your fucking eyes gouged out, fuckface. So that's the version that I don't think people should see because of that line. I think fucker is an important line in that movie. Maybe it's the only time I've ever thought the word fucker was important, but I think that really changes the context in a scene that's very important at a crux of the movie that's very important. So, but there it is, my favorite version. If I had to do a Gabriel cut, I like the narration except for when Roy dies. He needs to shut his fucking mouth when that happens. That when he in the theatrical release, there's a narration when Roy is sitting there dead,
I
and
just thought
Harrison
maybe
Ford
he
is
loved
heard.
life so much that he
Yeah,
said,
maybe he loved life so much he couldn't stand to see anybody else die, including me. And I went, no, that's for me to think. Maybe, or maybe his robot brain was just dying and he was doing random things. That's for you to figure out. That's not for the movie to fucking tell me. So there is no Gabriel cut. If there were, it would be pretty much the theatrical cut with that shit at the end cut out. But
so does that bring
yeah.
us to the goddamn birds that you don't like? But I actually
Okay, sure.
I'm
So
gonna
let's talk about some.
I'm gonna fight
Mhm.
you on this. I'm gonna fight you on this because
Okay.
I have a different take on the bird. But
All right.
but please complain about the bird.
Yeah. So there are parts. So whenever they're talking about whenever they are asking, are these, to what extent are these people, or to what extent, I always wish they would leave more out. I think that raising issues and not answering them is always the best. And there are little bits and pieces of Blade Runner where I think they say too much. Sorry. One of them is right at the very end where Roy gets a hold of a dove or a pigeon or something.
A dove is a pigeon.
Oh, okay. Whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not versed in bird
Yeah,
law,
a dove
so-
is literally just a pigeon that's happened to have been born white. You know, like Black Panthers are leopards.
But pigeons are white.
They're not all white. Our pigeons are normally grey.
Oh, I'm not talking about your fucking magical fairyland of fucking Britland. I'm talking about real life. I'm talking about a real country.
Local man flummoxed by the idea that the white pigeon is the rare one.
Did you ever see the Family Guy where they're doing that thing where you pull the thing and it makes an animal sound, but it's the UK version?
Gazoo.
And he goes, the cow goes shazoo.
Yeah.
It certainly does not. the pig goes wank. No, it doesn't. And what was I saying? Oh, the bird. Okay, so he's holding the Sorry.
You've tilted yourself with that one.
Yeah, I did. I fucked it all up. Okay, so at the end of the movie, when he's dying, Roy's holding this bird, and he gives his famous soliloquy, and he dies. And when he dies, the bird is released, and it goes flying up into the sky. And one might look at that and think, oh, that could be his soul going to heaven. It could that might mean that Roy had a soul after all. And I just don't do that. I that's a little too. It's inviting you to an imagery that could be a little too on the nose, in my view.
Here's my thought with it, right?
Sure.
Roy was a soldier, and all his life he was fighting a war. Even when he got down to Earth, he was fighting his own war. The dove is a symbol of peace. So you have a soldier quite literally holding a symbol of peace, and only when he dies does the bird fly off. So to me, it's less a matter of I see the sort of the symbolism of like it being his soul or something like that. I see that, but I think there's something more to it there, where it's like you have a guy who was on the warpath his entire life, and at the very end, he's clutching a symbol of peace, and he's stroking it, and while he's talking, and he's getting some comfort out of it while he's talking, and it's a peace symbol. And then when he dies, he lets go, like he lets go of the war, he lets go of that sort of conflict, and then the peace symbol flies off. That's more what I kind of think of it as, although obviously, like, I'm not gonna, if someone goes, that's his soul going to heaven, I'll be like, all right, fair enough. I see what you're getting at. Yeah, but I think that,
Yeah, sure.
but they didn't pick a white pigeon for no reason. They could have had any sort of birds. They could have had it be a regular grey pigeon, a crow, a fucking sparrow. They could have had any bird, and the symbolism would have been the same for a soul going off to heaven. But they chose a dove, which is the peace symbol, and they chose and he's the one that holds the dove, the one who was a soldier. The others didn't get that. So I think it is
Right.
probably more about him spending all his life at war, even when he was no longer officially a soldier, and he's still on the war path. He's still fighting a war that he then lets go. So this is why I actually quite like it, because I think there's more to it than it just being the bird being symbolism for the soul. That it's like, for me, it's like, if we're going to talk about the fact that he lets the bird go, when it is specifically a white dove, I think you have to sort of think in what does that bird literally represent? Like in the Crow, which is another great film that uses a bird as as a symbolism. The fact that they use a crow and not a dove is not incidental, because there's folklore around crows being emissaries of death, things like that. So yeah, that was my sort of thoughts on it that I wanted to.
No, I get it. I like that a lot better, and it's always and this is the thing, is this movie is the gift that keeps on giving. It's always great to hear something new in reference to this movie of how somebody took certain things, and I certainly, when I see that now, from now on, I'm going to be thinking of it as peace and not possibly his soul going to heaven, which. Which that brings me to another part of the theatrical release that makes it almost unforgivable, is the end where so the studio thought that the movie was too much of a downer. Imagine that. And so they wanted to have some kind of an upbeat ending, and so at the end of the theatrical release, you see Deckard and Rachel driving in this sun-dappled mountain range like they're going to a ski resort or something, and fuck that. That's absolutely it's a blasphemy to everything that happened in the rest of the film. So yeah, that part of that cut of the film can get fucked too.
Yeah, as opposed to, so like, I don't know if this is in the theatrical cut, but when I think of Blade Runner and when I think of the ending, I don't even know if this is the ending of the film. It might be a bit before it, but I think of Gaff with the "It's too bad she won't last," but then again, who does?
Then again, who does? Yeah.
I feel like Gaff is a character that is probably a lot more important to Blade Runner than you maybe would think at first. I've heard a lot of, I don't put too much stock into fan theories and things like that, and also because it was gonna come up, I don't subscribe to the idea that Deckard is a replicant.
If you don't mind me saying just a couple of words about that. Have you ever seen the movie? Have you ever seen the movie Glory?
That's the Matthew Broderick and Denzel
Matthew
Washington?
Broderick plays So Matthew Broderick plays a white general who leads a company of black soldiers during the Civil War, and he treats them with respect. He treats them like any other soldier. He stands with them. The army doesn't want to pay them, so he refuses to be paid to stand with them. He treats them like fellow soldiers and not like, inferior people or whatever. And I just want anybody who's seen that movie, for whatever you may think of that movie, and I have a lot of problems with that movie, but whatever you may think of that movie, just thinking about that character for a moment, and imagine at the end of the movie if they said, "Oh, he was black the whole time. That's why he was nice to them," and how absolutely cripplingly devastating that would be to the point of that character's arc. And you can imagine how I feel about the idea that Deckard's a replicant.
He was the reverse of Robert Downey Jr. in Tropic Thunder.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Would that not just gut the whole point, is that he was a good person and saw them as people, and he respected them because of his inner core of like his moral constitution. Oh no, he was just black the whole
Well,
time.
this is another reason
Nah.
why I like the sequel as well, because there was a lot of
Mhm.
fear that the sequel would confirm that Deckard was a replicant and make it 100% canon, regardless of what Ridley Scott did or didn't say. And I
Well,
love that when they
well,
float it out
yeah.
there, they float the idea where the not Tyrell with the Jared Leto, where he floats the idea out there. I was like, yeah, you could be a replicant, but I what I love is that Denis Villeneuve was like, no, no, I'm not doing it, because I think Villeneuve doesn't believe that he's a replicant either. And at a press conference, it might have been like Cannes or something like that, Ridley Scott was doing the whole, it doesn't make sense. The story doesn't make sense if he's human. And Denis Villeneuve literally just says to Ridley Scott, I don't agree. I don't think it's that simple at all.
Yeah, well, I mean, those are two. So Ridley Scott and that guy, and you and me, those are all fans of the movie. Those are all viewers just saying what they think about the movie. Ridley Scott talking, he didn't fucking write it. So what the? So he doesn't. His opinion is no greater or less than yours or mine or my brother's. So I don't even know why
I
anybody
had
cares what he
heard,
thinks.
I had heard, and this is why I think Gaff might be more important than I'm maybe thinking for, because I'm not like I'm not a super Blade Runner aficionado. It's a film that I've seen a lot of times, and I've seen the sequel a lot of times, but it's been a while. But I think what I had heard was that the final cut makes more. I'm saying this like I haven't seen the fucking film. This is how fucking banged out my brain is. That the final cut draws more of a comparison. Sorry, the final cut draws on the idea that Deckard is a replicant using memories that are specifically Gaff's. Because Gaff has the origami unicorn, which is what Deckard sees in his dreams. I think is that. Am I remembering that right?
He does. He has a unicorn dream, and that was put into, at least as far as Ridley Scott was concerned, to sort of solidify the idea that he's a replicant. The best internet reviewer ever, in my opinion, SF Debris, made a really good point about that. Possibly meaning that Deckard's a replicant because he has this dream about a unicorn. Unicorns aren't real. So that's not like an implanted memory. That's not like Rachel remembering her childhood. That's a dream. Unicorns aren't real.
Yeah, and it's not like it's weird that I'm bringing up The Crow again in this Blade Runner thing, but
Mm.
in the Crow graphic novel, like the comic book that the film is based on, you of course have the character the Skull Cowboy, but you also
Mhm.
have a recurring dream or vision that Eric has of a horse caught in a barbed wire fence. And
Mhm.
it's a recurring kind of metaphor for his pain and his grief. And then towards the end of the comic, in his dream, in his vision, he shoots the horse caught in the
The horse,
fence
yeah.
and puts it out of its misery. And then the next panel is the Skull Cowboy with the crow on his shoulder, and the Skull Cowboy says, "Nice shot, kid." So obviously,
Mm.
like the sort of the idea that the cowboy and the crow are guiding him through his grief, and that he's starting to
Right.
put it to bed. But like
Right.
of that horse being symbolic of him.
Yeah.
So I think that's sort of a thing with like you say, the unicorns aren't real, and also what does the unicorn within the realm of Blade Runner? mean? Like, what does that symbolize for Blade Runner specifically? Because Gaff makes origami unicorns, but I don't feel
Hmm.
like we know Gaff closely enough to know what that would mean to him. And also,
Yeah,
I think regardless of whether it's like because it's his memories or what, or like I think the film is obviously drawing a parallel between Deckard and Gaff, but they work in the same field as well, which could like
yeah.
there's a, I don't it's
And Gaff doesn't seem to have any hostility toward replicants either.
yeah.
He doesn't. That's the interesting thing that he's. I really like, and I'm glad you brought up that character. I really like Gaff because he doesn't say much, and his role and his feeling and his stance on things is very interpretive. Obviously, with the origami, and also with his silence, and everything. I really like that character, and I fully agree with you. He's more important than people may intuit when they're watching the film.
Yeah, and also again, because I can't help myself but bring up the sequel because I feel like they are kind of a package deal now. Uh, he came
Hmm.
back. He came back for the sequel in a way that did not feel like it was just dangling the keys and going, "Look, you remember Gaff." It was a like he is in the sequel because they are specifically trying to track down shit to do with Rachel,
Right.
and he's looking for Deckard. So why wouldn't you go see Gaff in the retirement home? And I do
Hmm.
like that, in spite of all of the fucking misery in the world of Blade Runner, he still just does his origami. I just kind of like
Yeah.
that for him. I kind
Yeah.
of like that
No,
for
that's
him.
cool. Um, so I want to we're gonna have to wind this down here, but I want to before we do our closing thoughts, I wanted to talk a little bit, if you don't mind, about the Turing test itself, because the Voight-Kampff test is a version of the Turing test, and the Turing test was a thought experiment by, what was the name, Alan
Alan
Turing.
Turing, yeah. Alan
Alan
Turing, yeah.
Turing. He thought that, so this was back in the, what decade was
ChatGPT
this? The
didn't exist.
50s?
We had Cleverbot.
No, this was the, yeah, I know, right? No, this was the fifth, what was it, the 50s? I think it was the 50s.
Yeah,
He
around
thought
then.
he thought that the test to see, so artificial intelligence was already a concept back then, and he thought that a test to see if we had fully replicated human intelligence in a machine would be the following. Say that you're sitting in a room, sort of like a confessional where you can't see the person next to you, and you're having a conversation just through printout. So you type things, and the things that you type go to the next room, and then you get a response through typing. He thought if you couldn't tell after a long period of time, sorry, if after a long period of time, if you couldn't tell if the thing you were talking to was a human being or a machine, that would indicate that we had replicated human intelligence. Now, I think that the Turing test has been utterly invalidated by ChatGPT. It may not have been fully tested by it because it was supposed to be a long period of
I think
conversation.
it was
I'm talking about
invalidated
like
before that
days.
as well, to be
Well, here's the
honest.
thing. We know for absolutely certain that what we call AI, ChatGPT, and all that is not human intelligence. That is not human intelligence. It scrapes the internet, and it does, basically, it's like the predictive text on your phone. It just says what's commonly said next. We know for absolutely certain there is no actual thinking going on there. So here we have an example of something that we know for sure is not human intelligence, and yet people can be fooled by it. So his test is void. It's not valid because people can be fooled by something into thinking they're having a conversation with something that does not have human intelligence. That is not, his test is not an accurate method for determining if something has human intelligence. And I think we've demonstrated that now.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. I think that's true. And to be honest, I have long thought that it was probably not true because of the website that used to be more of a thing before ChatGPT, which was Cleverbot. And I
Right.
remember an actual exchange I had with Cleverbot
Hmm.
where I typed in the lyrics, "We're no strangers to love," and it responded with no. I said, "Why?" And it said, "Because I want you to sing a Megadeth song." I don't know any Megadeth songs, so I quickly looked up some lyrics and typed them in, and Cleverbot went, "I know you took that from Google." That was long before ChatGPT, and I did wonder, I
Uh-huh.
really did wonder if
Yeah.
I was actually in a chat room.
Sure.
Yeah, so yeah, I've never thought that. I think the reason monism and dualism comes up in regards to Blade Runner is because monism and dualism kind of as an idea, it's like if essentially the I think the idea is that if a robot be a people, that debate would be solved essentially because we would know that consciousness is not something separate to the body because we built the fucking thing and it's conscious. But I think the problem is that that presupposes that I can ever know that that thing was
Hmm.
conscious anyway. Like my child is
Right.
not going to school with an Alexa.
Right.
Not
No,
even
and
a
the
woman
point
named
is that
Alexa.
right, and that's I think that's contrary to the message of the movie because the part of the whole the whole mechanism by which you know that these are people is that it's intuitive. And that's the thing. That's what I like about it, and that's what we don't like today. Is something that I think is very important and very dangerous to get away from is intuition. It's it is absolutely intuitive that these are people because of the questions that they're asking and the things that they value.
Yeah, I mean, when you look up the philosophy of Blade Runner, I've seen monism and dualism come up a bit. I know your brother talked about it once when he did a Blade Runner video like 1,000 fucking years ago. But
Hmm.
like I know he did, and I've seen some other sort of like real essays that kind of bring it up. But for me, for me, I feel with Blade Runner, and this is where I sort of right. So we talked about my favorite film, which is Godzilla.
Hmm.
It's pretty fucking hard to miss the point of Godzilla. It's
Uh-huh.
pretty fucking hard. Um, Nuclear weapons are dangerous, destructive, scary, and the people on the ground are what suffer. And as they say in the film, as I say in Godzilla, at the end, if we continue to mess about with nuclear weapons, there will be another Godzilla. The idea that if we continue to mess about with nuclear weapons, there will be another Hiroshima or another
Yeah.
Nagasaki. It will happen again. And it kind of did happen again in a way because you had the Chernobyl disaster, but you also had Fukushima, which inspired Shin Godzilla as well. So, like, it's very hard to miss that point. I don't
Right.
know what it is about Blade Runner where I feel like people are missing the point of it. That the idea of like when you mentioned my favorite person ever, Jimothy Sterling, about
Yeah.
saying that Detroit become human. Was it what was it? What was it?
What if robots but people? He said it was the 350,000th version of What if robots but people.
Yeah, and
Hmm.
in earnest, I don't think that that's exactly the point that Blade Runner is making.
That's it. Doesn't ask that question.
Yeah,
It simply doesn't ask that question. It shows you, this is, and this is a good lead into our outro because we are coming up on our time here. But what it shows you is what injustice looks and feels like, and
yeah.
it
Well,
invites you to uncomplicate the systems that we use to obfuscate the injustices in our own society. That's it.
Well, let's think. Let's take this a little bit further, right? Because it's time for
Hmm.
me to put my woke hat on.
Okay.
Deckard, what the fuck? When he's got Rachel in his house and he basically manufactures consent from her by telling her,
Oh, the rape scene? What the fuck was that? Yeah.
yeah, like I I
No, that was such a weird scene. He she's trying to leave. He angrily closes the door and incarcerates her, falsely imprisons her. He violently shoves her away from the door, and then he like stalks toward her and starts telling her to tell him that she wants him.
yeah. Now,
What the fuck was
and
that? Now
this
I'm
is the thing.
sure that was supposed to, yeah.
So there's a scene. Have you ever seen Rocky?
Hold that thought. I wasn't going to do this, but I have to pee so bad.
Okay.
Have I ever seen Rocky? I'll be right back.
Cool.
I have seen Rocky several times. Yeah.
So Rocky has that scene where Rocky has that scene where he like she's like doesn't Rocky has a scene that looks similar on the surface where it's like she's making to exit and he blocks the door and he's trying to sleep with her, and it's a scene that hasn't aged particularly well, but I think
Mm-hmm.
the difference is that there was not a part of me that felt that if Adrian went, "No, Rocky, I want to go," that he wouldn't be like, "Yo, baby, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to scare you," and then he would let her go. And then he'd
Yeah.
be sitting there kicking it, be like, "Man, stupid, I fucked it all up. Now she's gonna hate me." Like, I didn't believe for a second that
Yeah.
that couldn't be considered the 1970s and him being pig fucking ignorant, basically.
Yeah.
Um, he's not violent and aggressive towards her, and I'm meant to feel
Yeah.
good when she's running away with him at the end. I'm thinking like,
Yeah.
it was almost like he didn't fully believe in her personhood either.
I think the idea is that he knew. Okay, if I'm not,
We're
I
not
think what they were
excusing it. This is what just
not
yeah.
excusing it. No, and this was a bad scene. I think what they were going for is that he knew that she was repressed because she only has this tiny little lifespan and she was afraid to explore these feelings, and so he was just going to cut through the bullshit. He knew that she was attracted to him and loved him, but she didn't want to act on that because she was afraid, and she was like, fuck that. Do live your life, be yourself, do what you want, and don't be a slave to this programming that you have. I'm pretty sure that was the idea.
I think probably so
Unfortunately, it
too,
was
but it doesn't play well.
No, it was so weird. He was like he was attacking her.
Yeah,
Like
because
there's
that's
a
the same
so
premise of Rocky as well. That
yeah,
she's shy
yeah,
and
yeah,
she's under her
yeah.
brother's thumb,
Exactly,
and he's like, "Yo,
exactly.
baby, I
Yeah.
know how you feel about me." Like,
Yeah, exactly. But they've just done in the most just scary, and even the music takes a dark turn at that point.
Yeah.
It was just one of the worst ways to do that. Well, anyway, I'm going to give my final thoughts, and I'll
Yep.
let you give yours. This is my favorite movie. I think it tackles nearly the whole range of important questions about human society and human life without telling you about them. It invites you, it simply shows them and invites you to think about them. And one of the great utilities of this movie, I watch it when I'm feeling down because it gives you permission to feel that way. And I watch it when there's, bad shit going on in the world because it gives you permission to feel that way. And this movie deals with class. This dehumanization is something that only happens to a certain class of people, and different classes of people are shown at different levels of society in this movie. Because we are a society of different classes ourselves, it can often be difficult for us to empathize with other people in different classes. You know what I'm saying? If And one of the things I love about this movie is that it can be used as a sort of shorthand. If you are a wealthy CEO that lives in a gated community in Beverly Hills, you can watch this movie and know what injustice looks and sounds and feels like without experiencing it yourself. And I think that what else can you ask from a movie? So, in short, I love noir. I love science fiction. I love stuff about morality. I love portrayals of justice and injustice and all that. And this movie has all of that and more. And it is my favorite film.
I cannot really add to that in any meaningful way. I will just say, Daryl Hannah, what a dame.
She's really beautiful. I have it on in the background here while we're talking, and I don't mean this like. And we a lot of the time when we talk about people looking good these days, it's hard to decouple that from being like a sexual thing. I'm not attracted to her in that way, but she's really beautiful. Like she has a great look to her. That's
Yeah,
just
absolutely.
great. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. If I were Roy Batty, I'd go on a murderous rampage for Daryl Hannah.
Well, there you go. There you have it. Tune in next time when we go on a murderous rampage for a lot of really creepy, disgusting, beheaded things when we get together with our good friend Chris from Super Chris World and talk about The Thing. And whatever you may think of that movie, I guarantee you at one point you will say, "What the hell is that thing?"
Mac wants the flamethrower. Mac wants the what?